Hey, welcome back to the podcast growth series. This is part 4. I'm your host, Rob Z. So we've walked through 3 essential parts of getting that podcast off the ground and making it a reality for you, making it something tangible that makes you money, right? I showed you how to launch, I showed you how to streamline, and we talked about how to monetize. But today, we're going to talk about the guests that you need to have on your podcast. Now, this might not even apply to you. Maybe you're just doing a solo podcast, right? But if you're doing a solo podcast, it's going to be harder to monetize it because the monetization strategy works well when you have guests on the show, or works better when you have guests on the show. So from here on out, I'm going to be talking as if you have guests on the show for this episode, okay? How do you get high-level guests to come on your podcast? People that other people care about, people that other people want to listen to, and that you want to talk to. How do you make that happen? So as with every other episode, I break it down into 6 simple steps and strategies for you to find these incredible guests. Number 1, if you watched the last episode about monetization, we talked a lot about communities. Communities are the way to find incredible guests. Communities and referrals. I could leave it right there, those 2 things. Get in communities and get referrals. So just to give you an example, there's a community. I'm just going to use the podcast sponsor that I have right now, the Connected Leaders Academy. There's 400 entrepreneurs from all over the world in that community. Super high level people. Somewhere around 25% of that community earns over 7 figures. That's over $1 million a year. So those are people that I have direct connection to that would be incredible guests in my podcast that would get other people to watch and listen. Okay? And also would have incredible stories and also would leave a lot of impact and a lot of breakthrough, right? So communities, I'm in that community. I'm in a couple other communities. So simply, when I launched this podcast, when I launched my Unstuck Movement podcast a couple of years ago, I was in the community and I already knew, from my coaching background and what I had been doing in there already, I already knew a bunch of people that I had built relationships with. So I said, hey, would you come on the podcast? They were like, sure. So the first, 50 episodes or so were all kind of people from the Connected Leaders Academy. And then I started building the referral network. So I started asking, hey, do you know people that are outside of the Connected Leaders Academy? Or people that I knew from other industries or other communities that I was in, and I just made other connections. So I started bringing other people on. And I started getting referrals. And with each referral, I would say, do you know, and just simply, if it was an email, if it was a DM, or if it was like right after the podcast was over, I would just say something like, do you know somebody super high level that would be very impactful for the show? Somebody that would make a huge difference, has an incredible story of breakthrough, but also has like quite a following and would be a big get for the podcast. And when you do podcasts with people, if you're good at it and you're good at building relationships, you're going to build a friendly rapport with the people you have on. So you can ask them these questions and be like, listen, I want to build this thing up. I want to get great guests on here so I can tell great stories, but also so I can grow and get more reach. And they're going to help you out because you helped them out and you've now built a great relationship together. So you start building connections that way. And then I said this in the last episode, but once you start to get those people on, each person you have on, just say, hey, who's somebody high level, who's incredible, who would blow our socks off on this show? And I've never had anybody say, I'm not going to give you a referral. They make the connection for you. You bring those people on and you take it to the next level. It's that easy. There's nothing complicated to it. It's that easy, okay? Getting in those communities and finding those communities is the first step to this. So that's something you might want to be thinking about right now. How can I get access and gain access to these communities so I can get in these places so that I can get these podcast guests on and make this a reality? So that could be the step for you, maybe that you're at right now. Let's talk about outreach, okay? So I got my show notes here of what I want to talk about. And, when it comes to outreach, if you like someone, contact them. And I got to follow my own advice because I don't always do this, but when I do, I'm always blown away by who I can come in contact with. But if you read a great book and the author really inspires you, reach out to that author. If you see somebody on social media and you're inspired by them, reach out to them. Send them a DM. You never know. It's amazing sometimes who answers their DMs and will get right back to you. Who will answer an email and get right back to you. 6 degrees of separation now with the internet has broken down tremendously. And I think it's maybe 1 degree of separation. Recently, I just had Ivan Misner on my podcast. Ivan Misner is a billionaire. He started the platform BNI, Business Networking International. and I am in BNI. I've been in it for 2 years, and my local director said, hey, I meet with Ivan. Ivan's looking for podcast guests. Would you want to have Ivan on? I was like, yeah, let's do that. So now I've got Ivan on. So that's an amazing get, amazing connections come out of that connection from Ivan, right? So think about that. Keep that in mind. Invite people and ask them, right? Just ask them, hey, would you come on my podcast? Another thing too, as you do your podcast and as you grow it, and as you can tell people what the numbers are, right? That's incentive. Like, hey, I have a podcast, right? I'm on all of these social media platforms. I get this many downloads a month or watches or views or listens a month. Would you come on? Almost everybody says yes, unless they're super busy, but people are just happy to come on a podcast. They love to do it, and they love to promote themselves, and they love to have good conversation too, right? So showing up is one of the biggest things. You've got to be able to show up in rooms, be in rooms, and make the outreach. So if you're in a room with somebody physically or digitally, and you're like, man, that person's high level, reach out to them. Is there a connection? Do you have a connection to that person? Make the connection, make it a reality to get them on the podcast. Be outgoing. Just ask, and being outgoing is really just asking the questions of being like, hey, this is what I do. This is the podcast I have. This is the kind of reach that I have. And this is the impact I want to make with the show, right? You are the perfect person to have on here because I want your story to make an incredible impact on my show. So my show, The Unstuck Movements, True Testimonies of Breakthrough. These stories of breakthrough are super duper powerful because I love everybody has a story of breakthrough. Everybody has a story of getting unstuck, and anybody who's very successful has gotten unstuck and had breakthrough in some very major places in their life. So getting them to tell those stories is really, really powerful. And that story, usually with my podcast, when I tell them what it is, they're inspired to be like, yeah, I want to come on and share my story and tell my story. So how do you reach out? Talk about your reach. Talk about how you do that, all right? How do we get incredible guests? Communities, referrals, outreach, but what about awareness? How visible are you? Are people aware of you? If somebody hears about you and they search you, are they going to find you? So if you search me, if you search Rob Z. Wentz on social media, you're going to find my accounts right away. You're going to find my website, and you're going to see that I have a podcast. You're going to see that I'm a coach. I'm a breakthrough expert. I'm a leadership communication coach, and I help people get unstuck. My podcast also is about getting unstuck, the unstuck movement, okay? So I'm very visible. So how you have to be visible. So going back to the last episode and to the streamlining episode, making clips of your show and putting those clips on TikTok and on YouTube. I mentioned Opus Pro, right? Opus.pro, that platform, my clips from that platform get scheduled on all major social media platforms. My clips go on Facebook, my personal and business page. They go on X, they go on Instagram, they go on YouTube, and they go on TikTok. StreamYard, where I stream my podcast live, that goes live on 4 platforms. It goes on Facebook, my personal and business page. It goes on YouTube. It goes on LinkedIn. And it goes on X live, right? So if you go to any of my channels, my podcasts are going to pop up like crazy. And then if you go to if you go to Spotify, if you go to iTunes, if you go to Google Play, iHeartRadio, any of those platforms, a search for audio podcasts, my podcast comes up right away if you search The Unstuck Movement. So very visible. How visible are you? Because when somebody wants to find you and see you, and you're kind of hard to find, or they go to your show and there's 10 episodes and you haven't released an episode in 2 months, they're probably not going to come on. But if they go to your platform and it's full of content, and they see that your podcast is very active and you just had an episode released 2 days ago or a week ago or whatever, I mean, come on, man. That you got to be out there and be visible. So how are you marketing yourself? How are you branding yourself? Are you the authority, the expert in what you do? Brand yourself as that thing. And this goes back to the last monetization episode talking about courses and programs and stuff like that. Become the expert in your industry by having platforms that promote the thing that you're an expert at. Simple and straightforward. What are your numbers too? So here's a great thing. Podcasting, it can be kind of hard to find all the numbers, right? If you do video, though, it's easy to find video numbers. So if I look at I release clips, right? The clips of my show. So I'll release them on YouTube for YouTube Shorts. They're on TikTok. They're on Instagram. they all show number counts on all of those, right? So every one of my TikToks, and I don't even have that many followers on TikTok. I don't even know, by the time you watch this video, there might not even be 100 followers there, but each video gets at least 400 views. On YouTube, my subscriber rate is fairly low too. Unstuck Movement. My subscriber rate is not high, but my shorts, each short gets between 200 and 500 views. If I add those up over a monthly period, plus all the views on Facebook and on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything else, plus the downloads, right? I can see the downloads for the audio version. That's like somewhere around 30,000 views, listens, downloads per month, like over 30,000. Those clips are essential for that number because those clips get viewed so many more times than a full-length episode. So you want to make sure you're releasing those clips. But that is that visibility, knowing those numbers. So when you do the outreach, you send an email out and you say, hey, I have a podcast, The Unstuck Movement. I bring high-level guests on who tell great stories of breakthrough and how to get unstuck from difficult places in your life. I'm viewed, watched, downloaded, listened to over 30,000 times every single month, and I'm not blowing smoke. It's 100% true, okay? And then get others to brag about you, right? So this awareness factor, when you have a guest on and you ask them to refer you to somebody else, they already probably love what you're doing, and so they brag about you in that connection. When I connect people, when I make referrals, the way I always refer, if I can, is through Facebook or LinkedIn Messenger. I don't like sending emails or anything like that. I do a voice note on Facebook Messenger, a voice note on LinkedIn Messenger, and I will say, hey, this is this person, I'm connecting you to this person, and then I'll talk about how awesome that person is. And that's what people will end up doing for you also, really highlighting them and pumping you up, like blowing you up that you're this great person, right? That awareness is huge. This leads into number 5 on this list for today of getting incredible guests, being the authority. You have to be the expert at your thing, right? Your podcast has to display you as the expert in the thing that you desire to be an expert in. So brand yourself as that expert. For me, the expertise for me is breakthrough. When people think of the word breakthrough, they think of Rob Z. Wentz. When people think of getting unstuck, they think of Rob Z. Wentz. And breakthrough and getting unstuck are all about leadership and communication. The Unstuck Movement, Lit Coaching, Lead, Impact, Transform. It's all about that breakthrough in your life. A breakthrough expert. That's what I want to be known as. That's how I brand myself. My business is branded like that. And my podcast is branded like that. So what are you the authority in? What are you the expert in? And to give you a good example of why, if you don't have an expertise, this is harder to make this work. For years, I had a podcast called Rob Z Radio. And that podcast was an extension of my old radio show. And that podcast had no purpose. Like, I talked about this in the first episode, right? But that podcast did not have a necessarily distinct purpose behind it. And it was very hard to gain traction because nobody knew what it was about. And I didn't even know what it was about. So when somebody asked me what it was about, I was like, it's about all kinds of stuff. Who the heck's going to listen to a show that's about all kinds of stuff? Especially these days, being more specific. Specific is terrific. So be specific. And the last final note here on this episode, for episode 4 here, obviously communities, referrals, outreach, awareness, authority, those are all very important. But listen, this is important just in life in general, but if you want to grow, it's so important. Be of service. How are you being of service to others? I talked about BNI, right? The BNI motto is givers gain. So give first before you expect to gain anything. So how do you give? You bring people on, you blow them up, you highlight them, you feature them on your stuff, you celebrate them. You connect them to other great people, you pump them up. You hype other people. And as you hype other people, you start to gain recognition from that. You start to grow from that. So refer others, connect others, go out of your way to connect other people for no reason besides to help them. Support others. And also, this giver's gain mindset is everything. In every single part of your life, business, professional, whatever, giver's gain. Be a giver first, and you're going to gain so much from being that giver. Trust me, be of service. It's going to be such a huge advantage for you. So, as I've been talking about the launch, the free guide, the launch strategy guide, you can get that at the website, which is robzwentz.com, and also at robzwentz.com. If you've made it this far in this series, this podcast growth series, you really should join the wait list for the Pro Podcaster Academy. This is from launch to lucrative. All the things we're talking about in this 6-part series are all a part of the Pro Podcaster Academy, where I walk you through step by step doing this. We do this. I hold you accountable. I hold your hand to make sure, man, you're getting it done. We're making the things happen that need to happen for you to have the podcast of your dreams. And also, you're connected to a community who all support one another, share guests, share ideas, just help each other grow and support one another, because we need community. So at robzwentz.com, you can join the wait list. We have a wait list because sometimes it just gets too big and I have to shut it down for a little bit, and then I let some more people in later on as we continue to grow the Pro Podcaster Academy. So you can join that wait list right now. But while you're there, scroll down and get that free 33-page launch strategy podcast guide valued at $5,000. You click this link here, it's going to take you to this PDF, 33 pages of everything you need to ever launch your podcast right here to get it off the ground. Get that free guide, go to the website, and if you want to talk to me, you want to connect with me, you can do that there also. Schedule a call with Rob, click that link. That's going to take you to my ZCal calendar like I had talked about, and you can schedule a time, 15 minutes to talk with me. Super simple, nothing to it. Like, just make that connection, click the link, go there, boom, we'll set up a time for us to talk. That's all going on at robzwentz.com. I want to make this easy and accessible for you to get this podcast off the ground, but also not just to get it off the ground, to streamline it, to monetize it, to find great guests. And coming up in the next episode, how do you end up being a great guest on other people's podcasts? That's another amazing part of the sweet sauce of the podcasting formula for you to grow like a professional, high-level podcaster. We'll talk about that next time.